Today we're in Romans chapter 12, reading verse number 3, and it reads, "For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith." Good morning, everybody. I'm Carol, and welcome to Uplifting Home. And today I'm very excited about this video. I am sharing my tradition of making homemade apple butter. The weather outside begins to get cold and crisp and a chill in the air. It's the perfect time to start our homemade apple butter tradition. Now, if you happen to be cooking along with me today in this video, and I do invite everyone that would enjoy that to come along with me, then I suggest that the easiest thing to do is to watch the video all the way through, making notes, and then gather up all the supplies that you'll need, and then meet me back here in the video to start our cooking process. Now, don't forget that you can use the timestamp down in the description box below for an easy reference to get to the points in the video that you want to quickly go to. So I appreciate your patience and your interest in apple butter, and I've enjoyed speaking directly to you this morning, and it's time to get started. So let's get up, let's get started, or let's watch the video and take our notes, and then I'll see you right back here when the cooking process begins. So let's get started. First of all, we'll need our apples. Now, I've chosen Fuji apples to use today, but down in the description box below, I'll leave a couple of lists that you can go to and see some other varieties that are perfect for apple butter. Also, in part 1 of this video, I go into a little more details about how to choose the perfect apple for apple butter making, and some of my favorites. The most important thing when making unsweetened apple butter, or apple butter that has no processed sugar added to it, is to choose an apple that is sweet and firm. Because apple butter is cooked down and concentrated, it's extremely important to choose organic apples whenever you possibly can in making apple butter. Now, we have chosen to get a bushel or a case of apples this year. I do not recommend getting this many apples if you have painful conditions like fibromyalgia or other energy limited conditions. It's much better to stick to 5 to 10 pounds of apples, and normally that's what I do. But this year we thought that we would want to dry some as well as make a little bit more apple butter in this particular first batch of the year. When sticking to small batches of apple butter, about 5 to 10 pounds of apples is all that you'll need. And I've found that the pots that I use and my crock pot takes about 5 to 7 pounds of apples per pot. And next we'll need our liquid, either organic apple juice or organic cider or just pure water. And today I've chosen apple juice. I either use apple juice or apple cider. And today I've chosen this one, and I wonder if you can guess why. Because it comes in this gorgeous glass jug. I have not seen a jug like this in many years. And so if you guys watch my channel, you know that I adore glass jugs, jars, and bottles. And the main thing for our apple juice or cider is that it be organic apple juice only. No other ingredients are needed. And so we'll only be using the very most 4 cups. That's probably the very most liquid that you'll be using, or that I'll be using today. And so we don't need anywhere close to this much, but I love the bottle. And this particular apple juice came from Earth Fair Market. And the spices we'll be using today are ground cinnamon, ground cloves, allspice, and an optional spice is nutmeg, and we may use some citrus, orange, or lemon. And the nutmeg is optional, and I don't use it in mine any longer. We have a family member that has a sensitivity to nutmeg, so I no longer use it in my apple butter. But it is wonderful. It's a traditional spice that we use in apple butter. Now, there are lots of other apple butter spices out there. So you may want to Google and see what the other options are, what other people enjoy in their apple butter. But cinnamon, cloves, and allspice are the ones that we choose for our apple butter. Now, when it comes to adding the citrus, lemon, or orange, I've never seen anyone else do it exactly the way I do it. And I've just learned this through experience and kind of intuitively. But at the very end of the cooking process of the apples, I taste the apples. It's right before we put the spices in. I taste the apples and see just how sweet or how tart the apple butter is at that point, or the cooked apples are at that point. And that taste tells me, or gives me an indication on whether or not I'm going to add orange, lemon, or either leave it just as it is. Now, I can say that basically it goes like this. If it is on the tart side, just a little bit, because it's always sweet. But if it does have a certain tartness to it, I'll add the orange, possibly, zest and a little bit of the juice. If the apples at that point have a really strong sweet taste, and it all depends on how the apples cook up. And so if they do have the strong sweet taste, then I may add the lemon zest and lemon and a little bit of lemon juice. Now, if I taste the apples and they taste perfect, and I say, oh, no room for improvement here, then I'll just leave the citrus out altogether. So it's a very intuitive, a very instinctual type taste that I've acquired over the years of making our own apple butter. So maybe you'll do the same. Just experiment along the way and see how you like it. We'll also need some knives to cut our apples up with, and it's handy if we have a chopping block as well. I'll be using a flat-edged wooden spoon and a rubber spatula. The spoon will be to scrape and stir the apple butter with. Scraping the bottom is very handy, almost essential in making apple butter. And the rubber spatula is to run around the edge of the pot as the apple butter begins to stick to the edges and dries. So it's a perfect combination. This year I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to actually do a stovetop pot and a crock pot side by side. So I've done both of these individually many times before, but I've never done them both together side by side. So you can choose, if you like, which way that you want to go, either using a crock pot or using a heavy pot on the stovetop. So what we'll need is your choice of a heavy bottomed pot, such as an iron pot like this one, or a good sized crock pot. So the pot is about 7 quarts, and also the crock pot is about 7 quarts. And a 7-quart pot will hold about 5 to 7 pounds of apples. Because I use all the parts of the apple, the skin and the core, I use a food mill to separate these harder particles once the apples have gone through the first cooking. In the past, before I got a food mill, I would use a colander or a strainer with small holes, anything to grab and to separate the hulls and the seeds from the apples. Now, if you don't use the core, a regular handheld immersion blender works perfectly to chew up the skins and to make everything smooth after the first cooking. Or you can simply use a blender or a food processor. You may also want to go ahead and buy your canning jars if you know you're going to be canning your extra apple butter. Now, I've chosen these half-pint jelly jars, which I just love. They come with basic instructions and also some stickers that you can use for labeling the front of your jars. I like to save the box that the jars come in because it's a very sturdy little box, and it also has dividers. And I put either my empty jars back into the box, or sometimes I even store my apple butter in the box. Let's go ahead and get whatever kind of containers that we're going to be using for our apple butter washed and clean. And that way, when we get tired, we won't have to worry about containers. We'll have those all ready to go. Although the canning part of this video will be in part 3. And if you choose to, you can freeze your apple butter, either in plastic freezer containers or in these jars as well. Just make sure that you leave enough headspace for the expansion once the apple butter gets frozen. For many years, I've frozen apple butter in my canning jars. And now that we have our containers ready, let's clean our apples. First, we want to remove any stickers or labels that's on the apples. And remember, an organic apple will begin with the number 9. Sometimes the stickers are easy to remove, but if you've got a lot of stickers to take off, a knife is quite handy to just lift the sticker away from the apple skin. Even though the apples are organic, they still feel like they have some sort of residue on them, kind of an oiliness. And so we're going to go ahead and gently wash the apples. In a clean sink, we're going to cover the apples with cool water. And next, I'm going to add some all-natural dish liquid. And it doesn't need very much, just enough to cut through the residue on the apples. Or you could use half a cup of baking soda. When using a dish liquid to wash your apples in, make sure it's a natural dish liquid, not a dish detergent. Detergents have exactly that, a detergent in them, so we want to stay away from that. We want to make sure that the liquid is free of colors, dyes, and perfumes. If you can smell your dish liquid, don't use it. It should not have any smell at all. Also, to wash your organic apples, you never want to use bleach or a product that contains bleach. If you're ever unsure about a product, just go with half a cup of baking soda. That will be perfectly safe. And lastly, we want to add a couple of cups of white vinegar, just the plain old ordinary kind that you get at the supermarket. And with a clean cloth, we want to wash the apples thoroughly, especially in the crevices around the top of the apple and the bottom of the apple. And check for any areas on the apple that might still have some sticker glue from the sticker. Thoroughly rinse each apple under cool water and then quickly dry and buff. The buffing helps to remove the very last bit of residue left on the apple. And now it's time for us to cut our apples up. And here's an example of how I cut my apples. First, I slice the apple into 2 pieces down the center. Then I look for any blemishes or bad spots on the apple and cut them away. Next, I cut the apples into quarters, making 4 pieces. Then I go to the bottom of each piece and cut away that little fuzzy tail on the apple. Sometimes at this point I choose to remove the seeds of my apple. Now if I'm doing a lot of apples, I don't worry about it, but if I'm doing a very small batch, I go ahead and remove the seeds. That way I'm not bothered with them later on. And lastly, I cut each quarter into 3 or 4 slices, depending on how large the apple is. And then I'm just going to toss the pieces into my pot or my crock pot until the pot is really nice and full. And in my case, this is going to be about 5 pounds of apples per pot. And when the apples cook down just a little bit, we're going to add a couple more pounds per pot if you're doing a 7-quart pot. And now's the time to put in any of our saved apple peels and cores and apple pieces from our freezer. I've divided mine between the 2 pots. And next we're going to add our liquid, either apple juice, apple cider, or plain water. We're going to add 2 cups to the stovetop pot and only 1 cup, no more than 1 cup of liquid to the crock pot. And next we're going to cover our pots with our lids tightly. The first cooking process, the pots will be covered. The crock pot I'll set on high, and I always set it for 8 hours. It won't be 8 hours, the first cooking stage. And the stovetop, I set that for medium high so the liquid will come up to a boil and they'll begin to cook rapidly. And when the stovetop apples come to a rapid boil, I'm going to go ahead and turn them down to about medium low, making sure that they continue to boil until they're fork tender. And when the apples have cooked down just a little bit, maybe 10-15 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and add in the next couple pounds of apples. Or in other words, I'm going to fill the pot back up till it's rounding over. I'm going to put the lid back on and allow these apples to continue to cook along with the first apples until they're all fork tender. And about just in a little bit, you can give them a good stir together when the new ones get cooked down a little bit, and they'll combine nicely. And don't forget to put the lid back on the pot. And the same way with the crock pot. As soon as the apples cook down a little bit, I added in more apples on top, about 2 more pounds. So I had a total of 7 pounds in each 7-quart pot. And the apples on the stove top were nice and tender in less than an hour, probably more like 30 minutes or so once those top apples started boiling nicely as well. So with a fork you can just check your apples to make sure that they're nice and tender. Now at this point we're ready for the food meal with the stovetop apples. And remember, if you're not cooking the cores of the apples, then you can just go ahead and use a hand blender or a food processor or a regular blender. If you are using a food meal, this is what the apples will look like after they pass through the meal. Then return the apples back to the cooking pot, wiping down the edges of the pot with a damp cloth. Return the pot back to the stove on medium heat and return the applesauce back to a bubble. When it begins to boil, turn the applesauce down to about a medium low and allow it to cook slowly for the next several hours, stirring frequently, scraping down the bottom of the pot each time you give a good stir. This will get us used to scraping the bottom of the pot as we stir the apples, for when the apples get thicker later on, it'll be crucial as we stir to scrape the bottom. And at this time we'll leave the pot uncovered. And this begins our countdown. This is the end of hour number 1 after the apples have been pureed into applesauce. And from here on out, I'll give a little note in the corner, in the bottom corner here, that will let you know what the hour is and how the apples look and progress. And this will be very interesting to see all the different stages that the apple butter goes through and why it's so important to cook it slowly and give it plenty of time to enrich all this deep, wonderful flavor. And even after just 1 hour, you can see how the apples have started to accumulate on the sides of the pot. And if we don't take care of that little problem, that can really turn into a mess. And that's where our spatula comes in. So here we are on hour number 2. The apples are beginning to change slightly, and we're going to go ahead and take our spatula and clean up the sides of the pot. And this will be our regular practice all through the cooking of the apples. And after about 5 or 6 hours, the crock pot apples are ready to be pureed as well. I'm going to go ahead and run those through the food mill and back into the pot. But this time I'm going to leave the crock pot lid off of the pot. So the crock pot is uncovered from here on out. It's still on high, but it's uncovered. And this is the way the crock pot apples look at this point. And notice the different colors in the apples between the two pots. The crock pot is much darker than the stovetop pot. Same apples, they taste identical, they're just different colors. And here's our number 5, still on day 1, of course. And the pot is still cooking on medium-low. It's bubbling away, and it's starting to get a little bit thicker. And here's another little tip to go along with the side of the pot. So if you start to clean the side of the pot off, and you have some stuck-on apples that just won't budge. Now this is cleaning up pretty well right here, but just a little here that won't budge. You can take some of the hot apples and push up on the stuck-on apples, leave just for just a second or two, and then they wipe away very easily. So that's a great tip, especially as we move on forward and as the apples get thicker, they start sticking just a little bit more to the sides of the pan. So all you have to do is just push some apples up, let them stay there just a second or two, not very long, and then just wipe them away. And that's it for day number 1. The stovetop pot is cooked for 8 hours, and the crock pot cooked for 3 hours. And we're going to turn the heat off, put the lids back on. It's really nice and cool in our house. It'll be fine throughout the evening. And I'll meet you back here first thing in the morning. And tomorrow we'll watch some real magic happen as that rich golden deep brown turns our apple butter into deliciousness. Good morning. It's time for day 2 and apple butters everywhere. So this is the first hour in our cooking of day number 2. We're going to take the lids back off of both pots, the crock pot and the stovetop pot. We're going to turn the heat back up to about medium on the stove and the crock pot to high, and we're going to continue the cooking process. So the crock pot is quite watery, so it's going to probably take a little longer to get its act together, but the stovetop pot is looking fantastic and coming along nicely. Now at the very end, I'm probably going to mix the two together and have just one big pot anyway, but for now I'll just let them continue separately on their own. So this is the first hour of day 2. Yay! Hang in there. We're almost there. I'm so glad you guys are still here with me. Now when the stovetop pot comes back to a bubble, we're going to turn it back down to a medium-low like we had yesterday and allow it to continue to thicken and cook slowly. And then we'll get on to the next steps. The crock pot is on high and doing wonderful. So here we go. When the apples begin to spatter, you can set the lid back on the pot slightly ajar so the steam can still escape from the pot and the apple butter can continue to thicken. Day 2, hour number 9. I've gone ahead and combined both pots together and turned the temperature down to the lowest setting on my stove. I'll continue on from here. Now the apples have cooked today for 12 hours on the lowest temperature with the lid completely off, and this has really helped the apples to thicken up this very slow, low heat. This is where the magic happens, the last stages of the apple butter. And now it's time to give the apples a taste. This is where I decide whether or not I want to add any citrus. So here goes. It's really beautiful and it smells wonderful already without any spices. So here we go. Very good. Very, very good. So it's at a level of sweetness that I wouldn't even need to add anything to as far as orange or lemon. But I think since it's so close to the holidays and it would be very nice to go ahead and add the orange anyway. So I think we'll do that. We'll go ahead and have or zest the orange and juice it and add that in. But first we're going to test the apples to see how the thickness is coming along. And this is my grandmother's method of testing the apple butter or the apples before the spices are added. So we just get a little bit out on a saucer and we just allow it to sit just for a few moments and just observe it and see if there's how much liquid, if any, is coming from the little pile of apples here. Now this looks nice and thick and rich already before any spices are added. Beautiful. So it's still going to cook for at least 2 more hours after I put the spices in and the citrus. So it's going to get really lovely and thick. Now I'm whisking into the apples the juice of 1 orange and the zest of 1 orange. You want to zest the fruit first and then juice it. Now let's jump right into the spices. And you may ask, why wait to the last to add the spices? Most people add spices to their apple butter right from the beginning. Well, I wait till a couple hours before the apple butter is finished to add my spices. So the spices don't get overly concentrated. They stay fresher and truer to their own flavors, which I love. And a couple of hours is plenty of time for the spices to marry together and become one delicious flavor. Now everyone can choose their own level of spiciness for their apple butter. It's an individual preference and a family preference. So in our family, we like to keep the spices minimal. So the spices simply complement the apples, and the apples are still the star of the show. Now let's remember, I have about 14 pounds of apples total cooked down here in this one pot because I combined both pots together. So I'm going to start out, it's going to be a safe number. I'm going to start out with about a tablespoon of cinnamon, 1/4 of a teaspoon of cloves, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of allspice and nutmeg if you're using nutmeg. And this is our starting point. We can always add more. So we're going to stir it up really well and then have a taste, remembering that the flavors will intensify just a little bit over the next couple of hours. And then if it's okay, we're going to go ahead with the cooking process, or if you need more spice, then go ahead and add more spices. It's much better to add less first and add more as you need more. So if your palate says add more cinnamon, if cinnamon is a favorite in your household, then add more cinnamon. If it's the other spices, then add other spices. Just have fun with it. Developing your spice preferences and the amount of spice in your apple butter is one of the really fun parts about making apple butter. And now we're going to continue on with the last 2 hours of the cooking process. Remembering the stove is on the lowest temperature possible and the pot remains uncovered. And here we are. We've made it. This is day 2, hour 14. And the apple butter has not changed too much since hour 12 as far as appearance goes, but it's just the last couple hours is just a time for the spices and the citrus to kind of all come together and make perfection. So we're going to go ahead and give it one last taste, remembering we can still adjust any spices that we need to. It's beautiful at this point. And very good, very good. Okay, I declare this apple butter perfection. And we're finished. The apple butter is done. We've done a fantastic job. We've enjoyed ourselves completely. I'm so glad that you've joined me here to make this apple butter for the last couple of days. I'm so proud of you guys for hanging in there and actually doing something that takes time and commitment and the old-fashioned way. And so I really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, until next time, take care. Oh, and don't forget, the canning process will be coming up in part 3. Bye now.